Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be doing an in-depth look at the programming behind our controller kit. A lot of the information in this video you will be able to find in our install video, and I would also recommend watching this after the install just so you're very clear on how our controller works and what parameters you can adjust within the EggRider app. I know we've also made other videos like this, but I'm really going to be doing in-depth and going through every possible control within the EggRider display and how you can set up the user interface to display different variables like the amperage, the wattage, your speed, your percentage of battery remaining, other things like that. And then I'm also going to go over the limitations on our controller, which is also very important because our controller is set up to not have limits on it. And while that may sound unsafe, after you watch this video, you should feel comfortable enough to use our setup and calculate the proper power settings and battery settings on your own without being nervous about damaging your bike or our controller. So I'm going to move the camera and we'll take a closer look at the EggRider display, and I'll get the app out. Alright, so I got the EggRider app open here, and nothing's going to show up until we turn the bike on in the display. And we're working on trying to figure out how to get this display to automatically turn on when you turn the key to your bike on. Haven't quite figured it out yet, but you can see the bike shows up. We'll connect to it. And this right here is your UI screen. So all of these can be adjusted to how you want them set up. They don't exactly transfer over in the same way to what it looks like on your screen here. So this layout may be different, but what you can do here is these three lines over here next to your speed are what you're going to want to click to get back and get over to the settings. So the first thing we're going to do is go into rides, and this basically tracks all of your rides and how far you went. Pretty cool feature if you just want to keep track of how many miles are on your bike or how far you went in a day, things like that. But what really matters here is the display settings. So I'm going to read in the settings just because we've already set this up and we want them to show up. But preferred units, so we're going to start at the top, just work our way through all these. The preferred units would be wherever you're from, whether metric or imperial. We're not sure on the shipping internationally yet, so likely you will probably be a US-based customer, but we are working on a way to ship these internationally and just dealing with the charges. It's kind of tricky with UPS and getting international shipping all set up. So your secondary unit is what's going to show below your speed. So what I have down here is I have mine set on amps. There's also power and then efficiency. Efficiency is kind of unless you really have your bike set up perfectly, efficiency is not going to be super accurate. So I would just stick with power or current. Next here we have protocol, that's ASI. So the EggRider display and app were not designed by ASI. They're designed by their own company, and they work together with ASI to bring us this awesome package that allows for the EggRider to talk with ASI controllers. So under protocol, you're going to want to use ASI. There's other protocols within here, but we're just going to keep it on this one. Trip reset, you can have it so that your trip never resets unless you tell it to, or that it resets every time you start it up. Immobilizer, basically this means that when you leave your bike to go somewhere, it's going to completely lock up your bike, and if somebody tried to turn your bike on, it won't go until you connect to the bike with this app, as you can see here. So if you're constantly out in public, you should be locking your bike up anyway with an actual physical lock, but you can also lock the bike so that somebody couldn't just easily roll it away. Road restriction, this basically just means that it's going to limit your power to make this considered legal, although if you're familiar with Sur-Rons, you know that the whole legal thing is not exactly accurate. It's really not legal. But anyway, moving on. Start up with road mode. That's basically if you turn the bike on, it's going to start in the low power mode. instead of starting up in whatever mode you saved it to start up in. Power off, obviously, that's pretty self-explanatory. Mode labels, so when you first get this will be on road and off-road. This is synonymous with eco and sport. This is simply the naming convention and does not actually change the way the bike performs. I changed it to eco sport just to keep the naming convention that came on the bike stock from Sur-Ron, just so that our customers are more familiar with that. Assist levels, so on the display here you can see we're on power level setting here. Assist and power level are the same thing when you're dealing with E-Motos, because they don't have assist, they just have a throttle. So as you can see, if we have 9 power levels here, this will go up to 9, and then it will go all the way down to 0, and 0 is going to be no power, but we'll get into how you can change what each power is at 1, the power at 2, and so on and so forth, all the way up to 9. Which will be your max power setting. And also, so you have 10 power modes per eco and sport. So if I change this to sport, you can see that switches to 5. I have another 10 power modes. So you have 20 power modes total in this thing, which means you have a ton of adjustability, which is really nice. Headlight at startup, that function has not worked for us, although we have our headlight on a switch anyway, so it's not super important. So this next function here is if you short click mode, it changes modes, and then a long click gives you stats. That's something that you can, just flip flop between the two. Bafang switch mode, you really just want live data. And then, so max speed, road, and off-road, these are in kilometers, which you need to keep track of, because up here we have this set to imperial, but this is still going to be doing the conversion for kilometers when you put that in there. And then wheel size, there's some nice options in here. A lot of these are for mountain bikes, obviously, but we are on the Sur-Ron 19-inch here. So what this is for, this wheel circumference 1930, is for a Sur-Ron with your stock 19-inch rear wheel and the stock sprocket. What you're going to need to do is adjust this number upward. If you have a different sprocket, you'll likely have a higher tooth sprocket, and you'll need to adjust that upward until you get an accurate readout on your speedometer here. You can open up any GPS speedometer, like Waze or Google Maps. Those both have built-in speedometers in them, and basically you just want to cross-reference your display here and what it says in your GPS app, and just keep adjusting this number until you get the correct readout here that matches on your GPS app. So moving on here, you have a couple different battery settings, so you can save what battery you're using at the moment. So say you have 2 different 60-volt batteries. What you can do is, that are different amp hours, that is, you can set your first battery to be 32 amp hours, which is the stock Sur-Ron, and then say you have another one that's 50 amp hours, you can easily flip to second battery, and it'll recalculate your battery percentage. So getting into the percentage down here, selecting the battery voltage here doesn't do anything for your controller, unfortunately. We are still working with the developer at AgRider to try and get him to add a voltage switching mode. He said that he would do that for us so that people can run 72 volt and 60 volt. I'm really looking forward to that. But battery voltage here, that can just be left blank. Basically all this does is just set your max and minimum voltage for you, but we don't want that. We want to do this on our own. So we're going to go down here, and I'm going to actually read those old settings back in. So how I get these numbers here, voltage at 0%. What that means is that if you bypass your battery, or you have a battery without an indicator, something like that, you're going to want, this part is very important to set up correctly. So what this means is on your display here, when you want your display to output 0%, that's the voltage you're going to put there. And to find this voltage, you should do some research on the cells you're using and figure out what the minimum safe voltage is for a long lifespan. For us, we go 0.5 from the nominal voltage, and nominal per cell is 4.2. Nominal for the voltage per cell is 3.7 on 18 650 cells. So what that means is we have 16 of those in series. So you combine the voltages of 16 at 3.7 volts and you get 60 volts. Then you take and add 0.5 to the cell. That brings you up to 4.2 volts per cell. That should be your maximum. So you'll multiply 4.2 times 16 and you'll get 67.2. Going the other way, we aren't comfortable running our batteries below 3.2 volts per cell just for longevity reasons. Technically, they're stress tested down to, I think, around 2.5 to 2.7. So you could run them longer, but again, doing that is diminishing the life of them. So you'll take that number, 3.2, and you'll multiply that by 16. You'll get somewhere around 52. I know it's not exactly 52, but it's around there. You can do this for any battery. So say you have a 72 volt battery, you would multiply that by 20 instead of 16 because that's a 20 cell battery. So that's how you do the math to figure that out. And then capacity down here is just how many amp hours your battery is. That isn't something you need to calculate, but something you could. You should figure out the amp hours per cell and then multiply that by how many you have in parallel. So for example, this battery here has 11 in parallel, and I believe it's around 3,000 milliamps. So that's around 32 amp hours. And that's how that's calculated. So those are all of the functions on this screen. There's some stuff back in here that isn't really going to matter. You're not really going to need to use any of this stuff in here. So we'll move on to the ASI settings now. And under the ASI settings, I'm going to read mine back in. You have road and off-road again. This is your eco and sport. And so depending on the mode, if you're in eco or road, these are the settings that will be used on the left side of your screen here. If you're on sport or off-road mode, you're going to be using these settings over here. So we're going to just go through all of these settings one at a time, and I'll explain everything they do. So throttle max power here is at full throttle what power you're going to be reading. So for example, I have 4800 watts here, and we'll take and divide that by your nominal voltage of your battery, which is 60 volts. So 4800 over 60, and that will tell you how many amps you should be drawing. So the reason I have this set at 4800 is if you were running the stock Sur-Ron with the stock battery, your BMS limits you to around 85 to 90 amps. So what that means is you need to take 60, which is your voltage, and multiply that by your maximum BMS continuous amperage, which would be 85 to 90 for the stock one. That gives you somewhere around here. But we know for a fact that if you go above 4800 and, for example, you are full throttle and you land under throttle, that extra power kick from the resistance right as you land will boost the amperage draw on the battery above 90 amps, and that'll cause your BMS to shut off on the stock battery. And what you'll have to do is you'll need to turn off your bike, unplug the battery, disconnect the breaker, all that good stuff, let it sit for about a minute, and then plug everything back in and turn it on to get it to work again. So if you still have the BMS and you have not done the bypass, keep your power at 4800 or lower. If you have done the bypass, you can go around 7,000. That's what we have off-road mode for, is when we want to use the bypass power. So 7,000 watts is where we feel comfortable, but that number could technically be set higher. You just really need to understand that this battery has limits like any other battery, and by pushing it higher than this, you're pushing the cells to a point where you're damaging them to the point of no return. So we would recommend 7,000. You can run whatever you want, but it's not our fault if you fry your battery. So to calculate wattage, like I was saying, let's say you have a battery from one of the other manufacturers out there and you get a 72 volt battery and it's rated for 250 continuous amps, you would put, you would do 72 times 250, and that would give you the wattage you would put here. If you want max power, remember, you can put these to anything below these numbers, but you can't set it higher than that. So even if your battery is bypassed and you're riding, you go, you know what, 7,000 watts is a little crazy for me. You can still set this number to 5,000 or 6,000, whatever you want it to be. We're just telling you what you should set as an upper end range, so that you're not toasting your cells. So for the 72 volt 250, you would do the math. You could set that there, and you could also set anything below there, like I was just explaining. So moving down here, we got pedal assist system, max power. We don't have a pedal assist system, keep that 0. Motor phase current. So what phase current is your battery on your Sur-Ron is a DC output, which means direct current. And your motor runs on phase current. And so the purpose of the controller is to convert that power into, or that current, that DC current coming from your battery into phase current, which is why you have 3 wires going to your battery instead of just the standard positive and negative that you would see on like a normal just DC motor. So motor phase current, the limit for this controller is around 430 amps. I would not go higher than 430. And in fact, I would actually start probably at around 300 to 350 and work your way up until you feel comfortable. If you're worried about your bike being snappy and people get on it and they're scared because it's touchy when you get on the throttle, this is what you want to change here. Not your power. You still want full power when you go full throttle, but your phase amps are what control how hard the power hits on the bottom. So if you're riding along and you are just barely getting on it and it feels real jumpy and like it really wants to go, just turn down your phase current a little bit, and that should solve that issue. Regen ratio. I was talking to George over at ASI George over at Egg Rider, who's the guy who does all the development for the app. The word ratio here is kind of a weird way to say it, but essentially what this is as you turn these numbers up, you get more engine braking and more regen braking. And you may be confused on what the difference is. Regen is when you pull your brake lever, your motor starts to slow you down. Engine braking is when you let off the throttle and you're not touching the brakes and the motor just brakes for you. So those two things, they are different. They are a way of regenerating your battery, but one is called regen braking, the other is called engine braking. Even though this does not have an engine, it has a motor. That's still what it's called. So you can change those to adjust the amount of regen you have. If you don't like regen, just set them to 0. You can work up from there. We've never even ran this above 40 because honestly, it can get kind of aggressive, like to the point where you grab the brake just a little bit and it'll lock up your rear tire. There's so much regen happening. So just be careful and maybe only jump 5 to 10% at a time when you're testing that out on your own. Throttle max speed. That's pretty self-explanatory. I believe this is in kilometers an hour. I need to talk to George on that, but this, just to be safe, set this to kilometers an hour. You have another speed limit already in the display settings that we went over, so I would just set those to the same thing as you have set over there. Pedal assist max speed, I just left this at 100. Technically you could put it at 0. This is, again, we don't have pedal assist, so it doesn't matter. Battery current limit. So what this does is when you do, like I was doing that math earlier, when you take this 4800 and divide it by 60, that it's calculating your battery current on its own, which means it's doing 4800 over 60, which is around 90 amps. It's doing that math on its own. If you change this here to say, let's just say 90% or even 50%, so the math's easier. This will calculate 90 amps, but if you set this to 50%, it'll only take 50% of the calculated amperage up here, which would be 45 amps. So I think this is kind of just an extra setting that you really don't need to be using. But if you're inclined to limit the current coming from your battery, that's a way to do it, although it is just a percentage of this, so you're not exactly setting a hard limit. And then down here, very last setting is field weakening. And what field weakening is when a motor that runs on electricity spins forward in this direction, it creates a magnetic field. And that magnetic field is resisting in the opposite direction. So you have the motor trying to spin this way, and you have a magnetic field that gets generated from the current that's trying to push it in the other direction. And so what field weakening does is it literally reduces the magnetic field that's being induced by the current. So it sends a magnetic field of its own in the opposite direction, and that cancels out with the magnetic field coming that's generated by the motor. So this number here, as you can see, they say max 50%. I wouldn't even get near 50%, frankly. I have never even gone above 30. Field weakening is not something that's healthy for your motor at high levels. We run ours at 10, and the purpose of field weakening is basically just to get you a little more top speed. Right at the top there where that magnetic field's super high and it's trying to resist your speed as much as possible, this just adds a little bit more, so you get, like it says, 10% more field weakening. So 10% that magnetic field is reduced, which gives you just a little more top speed. We found like maybe between 5 and 10 miles an hour, depending on where you set this. But again, I really wouldn't go setting that above 30, although he says 50. On the stock battery, I would just leave it at 0 unless you bypass it. The stock battery is not producing enough amperage for it to be really necessary. But again, you can do as you please. Like I was saying, this app does not limit you. Final place we're going to go is to, we'll go at the app settings at the end, but the power levels. So this is what I was talking about. So just to give you a little refresher, we'll go to display settings first. If you have this assist level set to 3 or 5 or 9, that is how many power levels you have. So ours is set to 9, so we have 9 power levels. And what these do is give you a percentage of the max power that you have set over in your ASI settings. So that power thing that was up here at the top, this is simply a percentage of that. So down here we have 20% of 4,800 watts. That's approaching 2,000 watts. It's like 960, somewhere around there, 960 watts. So if I'm in road or eco mode and I'm in power level 1, I'll have 20% of that power that I set, 960 watts. My speed will also be 20% of that 100 kilometers. So that'll be around 20 kilometers an hour. Or of the 100 kilometers, 20% of the 100 is 20. So pretty self-explanatory. You should get the same thing for off-road power over here. So you can set these to whatever you want. If you want power level 7 through 9 to all be 100% power, but just limit your speed differently, you can do that. If you want them all to have 100% speed potential and have different power, you can do that. So that's the power levels. Finally, we'll go to the app settings here. And basically, you can kind of just control what shows up, what things you have access to here. You can just check them in. It's pretty straightforward there. There's not a whole lot going on in there. Final thing is that whenever you change a setting, I know we've said this so many times, but it's really important. Whenever you change any settings, you need to come down here and click right. And then after that, you need to go up here and cycle your power off and then on again. And what that'll do is it'll save your settings within the actual display, as well as what you've written to it from the app. Then if you ever want to come back, so for example, I'll turn off the bike and it'll disconnect here. Let me turn it back on. There it is, and I'll reconnect to it. And it'll change your power to whatever you have that saved to. But now when I go back into let's just go to our ASI settings, for example, these can change. So what you need to do is you need to click read every time to read them in. Same on the display settings. You go back here, these may change. Not a worry, you just click read. So before you change anything, you read. After you change anything, you write. And reset the display by cycling the power. So that's kind of an in-depth look. You should be able to do basically all of the controls now yourself, do those calculations to figure out your power and your amp draw and things like that. If you have any questions, you can always email us, of course, or you can leave a comment and maybe somebody else has had the same issue, should respond. If an update for this ever comes out, we go over how to update the app in our installation video, so you can head over there. When the voltage switching capability comes out, so that you can use a stock battery and a 72 volt battery, for example, that we will have an announcement about that. We will have the download links for that update, and that is completely something you can do on your own. You don't have to send the controller back. You don't have to email us, any of that. This is all over the air. We can't change the parameters on your actual controller, but anything in the display here, you can update over the air yourself. So all the new updates, you should have full access to them. All right, that's all we have for the Egg Rider tuning. If you have any questions, like I was saying, please do not hesitate to email us. We're happy to answer your questions. We want your bike to work with our kit. And if you ever are unsure of something, again, just don't hesitate to ask. If you appreciated this video and you liked it, please leave a like. It really helps us out and gets the algorithm going. And if you're interested in more videos like this, we plan on just posting a lot about the Sur-Ron. Stay subscribed, or subscribe if you haven't yet, so you can see all our new content coming out. Thanks for watching and have a good day.